Hi everybody, it's Michael Hollands once again for Sound of the Movies. Today I have the pleasure to talk to Emmy Award winning composer Jeff Russo. After starting out as a guitarist and founding member of the highly successful band Tonic, Jeff Russo has become one of the hottest composers for film and television. His credits include Crossing Jordan, The Unusuals, The Night Of, Legion, Hostages, Fargo, and the brand new series Star Trek The Discovery. Welcome, Jeff.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for asking. I hope you're good too.
I am well, thank you.
Great. Jeff, at first I would like to talk about your musical backgrounds.
Sure. I started playing music when I was a kid. I started really getting into playing music when my father used to play records when I was really young. I was like 7, 8 years old. My father used to play Beethoven all the time in the house. He had, I remember he had this collection of all 9 symphonies in a box set, in a record box set, which was something that I always played in the house. And I just sort of started playing, instruments that I could just pick up. There was a piano, so I just sort of banged around on the piano, and then it wasn't until I found playing drums when I was about 11 that I really started, taking it a little more seriously. But even after that, when I started playing in bands and stuff in high school, I realized that I wanted to be a guitar player. So I sort of taught myself how to play guitar and then started a band. And the next thing I knew, I was, making a band with my good friends and making records and writing songs. And that was sort of the beginnings of my musical ambitions, and trying to and realizing that was the thing that I really wanted to do in life, was just make music. So that was sort of like where the musical beginnings came from.
When did you decide it was the time had come to form your band Tonic?
I had been in bands my whole childhood, like teenage years, and I came out to Los Angeles and I had started this other band, and we had made some recordings and we got a record deal, but in the end that band didn't feel right to me, so I left that band. And then formed Tonic with my good friend Emerson, who was the singer in that band. That was when I was like 23, 22. So I was 22 when I formed Tonic with Emerson, and we started writing songs together and started playing shows here in Los Angeles at small clubs. So it was a long time ago. That was 25 years ago. Wow, it's a long time.
I actually became conscious of Tonic with the album Sugar.
Sure.
Yeah, and the movie American Pie had a lot to
Yeah.
do with that actually. Yeah, when I was like 14 at that time, and I bought the record and I had seen the movie, and it was also on the soundtrack of American Pie, and that's my kind of first Tonic experience.
That's interesting. Yeah, I remember we were touring in Europe around that time that came out. We did a bunch of dates in Germany and in Amsterdam and all around Europe, supporting that particular record when American Pie came out. It was like 1998, 1999, right?
99, yeah. Still pre-millennium, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that time very well.
Do you actually have any plans returning to Germany, maybe with Tonic, or do you plan on touring again?
Well, the band does continue to tour, and I do play some select shows with them, but I don't really have the time to devote to going on a full tour. It's not only about being busy writing for film and TV, but also my family. I don't want to be away from my kids for that long. My kids are young, and I'd like I'd like to spend as much time with them as I can, and going on a tour of 6 weeks or whatever would really, that doesn't help that.
No.
Yeah.
You have released, I think, 7 Tonic albums, including the best of. Which one would you consider your favorite and the best album you've done with Tonic?
Well, it's difficult. That's a really difficult question because they're all very near and dear to my heart, every one of them. And every one of them is a moment in time that I cherish. But I would say, our first album has the most connection to my nostalgic part of my brain, because you only ever make one first album, right? So that to me is it's near and dear to my heart, maybe slightly more than the rest. So I would say the first one, Lemon Parade.
Yeah, that was 96, right?
It came out in 96, that's right.
After that, many years after, you entered the TV scoring world. You also wrote music for a video game, Madden NFL 18, and you have written music for all Fargo seasons, then The Unusual, CSI Cyber. You worked on Hostages, Crossing Jordan with Lisa Coleman, Wendy Melvoin, and most recently you also did, Star Trek Discovery. How difficult would you say was the transition for you coming from a rock background and subsequently writing for television and film?
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned Wendy and Lisa. So Crossing Jordan was my first introduction into working in TV. I got my start because Wendy, who's a good friend of mine and my wife's, asked me to come in and just sit and listen to what they were doing, because it was at a time where Tonic was on a break. This was about 2005, 2006. We were taking a break, and I honestly didn't know what I was going to do next. Like, I just didn't know. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know, was I going to make records? Was I going to make a solo record? Did I want to continue doing music like that? Like, it was needing to figure out what it was I wanted to do. And they had successfully made a transition from being in pop music to being, working in music, working in television, and film. So I sat in their studio for about a month watching them do what they do, and I became enamored with writing music for a narrative, which is a very, very unique opportunity and very unique experience to do. And it's similar to writing songs in terms of the lyric and the dialogue is already written. So I have to just figure out how to underscore that. And I think that my experience as a songwriter helped me understand how to do that, and not just understand how to do that, but really fall in love with the desire to do that, and have it be thrilling to try to enhance the emotional content of a story with music.
How would you describe your evolution as an artist in terms of pure musical skills, in terms of orchestration? And I think you also started conducting. You also conducted Star Trek sessions, right?
Yeah, I do. I just, in the last year I've started conducting. I started learning how to conduct. I mean, I am not a classically trained musician. So everything I've learned about orchestral music has been by ear and by reading and by, listening and by sort of doing it, teaching being self-taught. I would say like my growth in that is mainly due to the work I did on Fargo. When I talked about doing Fargo with Noah, who's the showrunner, the idea was it was going to be an orchestral score, which I had never done before. So he took a chance on me. I had to sort of figure out how to do it and what to do. And it was it was terrifying, like doing something I'd never done before. But I think that that's the only way I think you learn new things, is to just do something that you've never done before. And I think that in and of itself was the catalyst for me to really grow into the next phase of my artistic life, which is, discovering instrumental music that can be listened to on its own. And it's because the kind of music that I did for Fargo, the kind of music that I do for Legion, even the kind of music that I do for Star Trek, it's about, that's score that you can actually listen to and, feel like, oh, there's a melody, there's a meaning for this piece of music. It's not just ambient background music. And I think that's where my artistic endeavor had shifted. When I went to do Fargo, and I realized I could do that kind of music and have it be really meaningful to me artistically. The more I did it, the more I got into it.
I liked Fargo a lot. I mean, both the series and your score. And just today, before this interview, I listened to Fargo 3, the score which you wrote for Fargo. I think the score you wrote for the third season might be the best of all Fargos. At least that's my 2 cents. So.
Well, thank you. I think that I'm proud and connected to all 3 of the season's music, but I do have a special connection to 3 because I pushed myself in a way that I hadn't done before. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I feel like I might feel the same thing.
It was also a very great idea to arrange the main theme for a choir. That was, yeah.
That was a good time. That was fun. That was something that I had wanted to do before, but just hadn't had it wasn't going to fit anywhere. Like, it wasn't in season 2, season 1, the idea hadn't occurred to me. Season 2, the idea had occurred, but it just didn't fit to do in that season. And in season 3, it did sort of become something that could work. So, yeah.
Okay, I would say let's talk about Star Trek, since I don't think we have that much time today. But how did you get involved with Star Trek in the first place?
Well, it was literally accidental. I was with my children camping on a school camping trip, and I was sitting with one of the other parents, and we just started talking like, I didn't know what she did. She didn't know what I did. And we started talking about, things. And she was like, what do you do? And I said, I write music for films and TV and stuff. And she said, oh, what have you been working on? At the time, I had just finished a show called The Night Of. And she said, oh my God, I really love The Night Of. I really love Fargo. And I said, oh, that's really great. And I said, what do you do? She said she is a producer, television producer, film producer. And we started talking about what she was working on. When she said Star Trek, I was like, oh my God, I'm a huge Star Trek fan. That's so amazing. It must be so great to work on that. And then she said, would you be interested in doing the music? And I said, you've got to be kidding me. Of course I would. She said, you should come in and meet our producers. So I did. I went in and met the producers, and we talked about what I thought the music could be and what they wanted the music to do in season 1. And we all just had a great meeting. And then about a month later, they called. They were like, we want to hire you. It was one of those things where, you get that phone call. You're like, what the fuck? Oh my God. So it was just one of those things that was really, really incredible to hear, that they were really interested. They were really interested in in what I had to say about how to tell this story from my musical perspective, like how I like to write music, and I tend to be a little more subtle. I tend to write from an emotional perspective, which I think might be new to Star Trek. And I think that it was really great that they embraced that. And then, of course, like wanting to embrace the sound of what I think Star Trek is, which is, there's this swashbuckling adventure motif, I would say, in the sound of the scores for soundtrack. And I wanted to make sure that was well represented.
If I'm not mistaken, there are 15 episodes of the first season, right?
There are. I'm currently just getting finished writing the finale.
Okay. Maybe you could walk me through the process. Did you score episode by episode, and how much time did you have to score?
Well, so yes, I score episode by episode, and I have about 3 weeks from start to finish for every episode. A little less, maybe 2.5 weeks from the time that I see the episode and we talk about music to the time I have to deliver a fully recorded mixed score. It's about 2.5 to 3 weeks. So we spot the show, we talk about where music should and shouldn't be and what kind of music and how to make it what the producers want, and then I take it back to my studio and I go to work writing the cues.
Music-wise, Star Trek has a great history. I mean, we're talking about Jerry Goldsmith, James Horner, Michael Giacchino, Alexander Courage, and Jay Chataway, and all those great composers. Did you revisit those scores in order to get inspired?
I didn't have to, because I've been such a Star Trek fan that I know a lot of music. So did I go back and listen to it again? Sure. But I've been listening to Star Trek music for my entire life. I loved the score. I love the scores from all the movies and the original series and the first few seasons of the Next Generation and certainly the Next Generation movies, and then the movies beyond that. The Giacchino years. So I didn't specifically go back to review, but I did continue my odyssey of listening to Jerry Goldsmith and James Horner, who I think wrote my favorite Star Trek score, because I think my favorite Star Trek score is the Wrath of Khan, which to me is the perfect blend of that swashbuckling and emotional way of telling a story, which he did very, very well.
Yeah, if I were to decide, I think, it would be a tie between Goldsmith and James Horner. Yeah.
There's something to be said about the fact that Goldsmith wrote some of those great themes, like, the theme that ended up becoming the theme for The Next Generation, which ended up in the original, in the Star Trek The Motion Picture. And then, Archer's theme and some of these other really, really, really fantastic thematic material from all the composers.
What was your general experience with the creative process on the show in terms of writing the music and the communication with directors and producers?
Well, in television, you don't really have a lot of communication with the directors. The directors are really more in touch and more in charge of what happens in production in the television world. It's really the producers that have way more of a connection to post-production and making the music and sound design and VFX and stuff. But they were very, very, they gave me a lot of leeway. They really have allowed me a lot of room to create and grow and figure out what the sound of the show is. We agreed pretty much early on what that sound was, and I think I write a score, I send it to them for review, and they send me whatever notes they have, which is, there have been a few changes here and there, but it's been really, really wide in terms of the amount of leeway they've given me to write the scores. I've been really, really super happy with that.
Did you have a favorite episode of the first season, or even a favorite piece of music that you wrote?
Well, I think some of my favorite pieces of music and my favorite episodes have come, in a number of different episodes. Mud, the episode 7, is among a favorite of mine. There are a few episodes in the second batch of episodes that I really like, and I really like some of the music that I've been working on for in this second half of the season. So it's difficult to say. I go back and I listen to the soundtrack and I go, oh yeah, unfortunately I wasn't able to put everything on the soundtrack because there's just not enough room. We're going to do a volume 2, which is going to include different pieces from the first batch and a lot of music from the second half of the season. But it's interesting, I haven't really been able to put my finger on a favorite piece yet.
Okay. When are you going to release volume 2? Because I think as a physical release, volume 1 is about to be released early 2018, right?
Yeah, so volume one is available digitally now.
Yep.
CD coming in the next few weeks.
Yep.
And then after the season is over, we're going to do a special edition vinyl release, which will include the volume 2 and volume 1.
Okay.
That'll be sometime in March or April.
Okay. Sounds great. In terms of theme composition and instrumentation, how did you decide which sounds and themes would be a perfect fit for the tone of the show?
Well, the starting point was the orchestra. I always knew that it was going to be a very orchestral-based score because that's very Star Trek to me. With that said, everything else was sort of trial by fire, figuring out what the sound of Michael Burnham was or what the sound of the Klingons would be or what the sound of the Vulcans would be was a trial by fire. It really was. Like, as I was writing that very first piece of music in episode 1, where I was thinking about the Michael Burnham and Georgiou theme together, there were flutes involved, and I think that it worked. When I started writing stuff for Klingons, I sort of went back and forth between what different instruments could be used in this way, and I wanted to have a bit of an ethnic flavor to them because they're not human, so it needed to sound a little different, but I didn't want to be too on the nose with it. So I went with something called an Ely timbre and duduk.
Yeah, right.
And they worked out really well. Lorca has a cello for his theme, which then extends into the second half of the season. The Star Trek main feeling is all brass. So there's a lot of brass for that sort of swashbuckling thing. A lot of French horns, a lot of trombones and trumpets. But really it was trying to figure out the sounds that the orchestra could make. I did a lot of creating sounds with orchestral instruments in order to do a lot of the sound designy type part of the score as well.
How big was the orchestra that you worked with?
We're mainly about a 65-piece orchestra.
How much time do you actually have, or did you have, for each session?
I have one day to record the whole score.
You said that Volume 2 will be released. I mean, we had about 52 minutes of score on the first album. Okay. How much music do you think will be released as Volume 2? Can you indicate that?
I don't know yet. Probably close to, like new music, probably about 30 minutes, maybe more. 30 to 40. I guess, I don't know. I really have to have that conversation with the filmmakers after I'm done with this episode.
Okay. In terms of your musical approach to find the right music, do you feel more comfortable, taking on the characters, or is it a story that, sparks your inspiration, or how do you usually work?
I think it's all about the story. It's all about the story and the characters. Like if something is engaging to me, it makes me feel connected to it. I'm inspired to write something for it. Um, it's a little more difficult to do that when I'm not connected to the story. But that hasn't been a problem for me recently. I've been very, very lucky to work on such great material, Fargo and Star Trek and Legion and The Night Of, and these shows have really, really great narratives and really great characters and really great writing, and to me that's just super inspiring.
Many TV shows these days seem to have, more of an electronic score. Did you feel that there were actually some discussions about whether it should be orchestral or electronical or maybe hybrid? Because Star Trek has a history of big orchestra music. How do you remember that?
Well, for me, in my initial discussions with them, it was always like Star Trek must have a big orchestral element to the score. For it to be Star Trek and for it to feel Star Trek, to me, there needs to be an orchestra, and they all agreed. Now there is also a very electronic element to the score, so it is absolutely a hybrid score. There are synthesizers employed. There's all kinds of stuff that I use in order to get the score done, but I think the main part is this orchestra, and I think that that was the thing from the very very onset, the very outset of the conversations. There was never a time when we were like, maybe it should be an orchestra or an electronic score. That was never an idea for this. Not in any of the conversations I had.
Jeff, what's next for you? What are your future goals and projects, if you're allowed to talk about them?
Well, I'm currently, like I said, I'm finishing up episode 15.
Yep.
I'm working on Legion season 2 right now, and then I'm starting a movie coming up very soon, probably in March, and then I'm starting another movie with Noah. His movie is doing this summer. And then apparently I just heard that we might be doing a season 4 of Fargo. So I'll be doing that as well.
Great. I would love to see another Fargo season. That's really, really good stuff.
It's definitely an interesting ride. That's for sure.
Do you have any plans on releasing some older stuff you did? I mean, if I'm not entirely wrong, there is no release of The Unusuals, right?
There's no release of The Unusuals. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. I haven't really thought about the music from that show for a long time, since that was about 8 years ago. So I don't know. That's not a bad idea. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll make something out of it.
I just thought about it a couple of days ago when I visited your website, and I went through some of the cues on your, and I also came across The Unusuals, which I also hadn't a show which I hadn't seen in years, and then I listened to the music again, and there were some pretty interesting pieces, and then I realized, okay, there is no digital or physical release whatsoever. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I will think about that.
Jeff, thanks again for your time. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Pleasure.
And hope to talk soon. Hope to see you soon. And you have a nice day.
You too. Thank you very much.